Jennifer, thank you. And Jennifer brings new experience to the table and introducing another concept for thought and consumption, and that's regulatory policy in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, as it deals with the permitting process, the oversight process, the planning that companies must do, as well as the cleanup that would need to be done in the event of any type of accidents. It seems so far that DEP has their hands full and is working aggressively to address future concerns associated with the drilling. So maybe we could talk about that during the discussion period. Now I'd like to introduce Pat Carollo. Pat is here representing the Damascus Citizens Organization and is the co-founder of that group.
Thank you. Yeah, I'll carry the mic. Just a moment here to hook up some of this gear. And I'll just turn the lights down a bit. Well, thank you for your time this evening and for your consideration. The Damascus Citizens.org website yesterday got 50,000 hits. DamascusCitizens.org. Please remember that, because I helped Adobe build the PDF technology. So we're leveraging these many technologies to just get out as much information as rapidly as we can. Because for all intents and purposes, I believe very strongly that we are really in so many ways asking for a lot of difficulty with these scenarios. Let me say we wouldn't be here this evening if not for our addiction to fossil fuels. We are addicted to fossil fuels. Now, it's not only that addiction. One has to ask, why are we addicted? Well, lots of reasons, but I don't know if you noticed there's a beautiful train station here in town. No trains coming to the station. So we're in our automobiles, because we actually have one choice, automobiles. So we're addicted. There's lots of reasons why we're addicted, but we are addicted. So step one, we have to get a sense of that addiction. What an addict does is deny, obfuscate, lie, cheat, steal, do anything they have to. In this case, in 2005, one industry was given exemptions to every single federal law. One industry. The gas and oil industry. And now we're wrestling with the ramifications of that. One ramification, for example, is the small town, you may have heard about it, small town of Pittsburgh. Well, Pittsburgh lost its municipal drinking water supply. 385,000 citizens were told to drink bottled water. So really what it is I want to point out is that these issues really are global issues. They're national issues. This is a national issue. We're doing this because we're told, and by the way, I don't have a television. How many people have seen, just right off the bat, I don't know, that's why I'm asking. How many people have seen advertisements by the gas and oil industry here in Pennsylvania? How many people have seen ads on TV? Everybody. So there's a huge national effort. We are told, this is patriotic, we are told we will be using less foreign oil. I believe that the challenge really is, why is it that we're in this fix? Why are we addicted? So Shale drilling is also a regional issue. Shale drilling is a local issue. Shale drilling's even really a personal issue. And for me, it's a profound personal issue because to me, I'm always in the river. Above my head right now are 2 or 3 eagles. Those eagles really were brought back from total destruction because of this chemical influx into their environment. We're talking here thousands of gas wells with secret toxic chemicals being injected into the ground. We may see lists. Those lists may not be the chemicals that are used. So I'm trying to broaden this out. I don't want to really talk about facts, figures. The lawyers will take care of that when the time comes. The health experts and our technical experts will take care of that when the time comes. But make no mistake, what we're fighting to protect is a public treasure, a sublime place. This is please bear with this 1-minute video, but I show this to you not to look at the turtle on the rock. This is Philadelphia drinking water passing by me. This bubbles up out of the ground where I live, and it does so here also for those of you who have a well and need to drink the water out of the well. So this is Philadelphia's drinking water. This is Camden's drinking water. This is the drinking water that recharges half of New Jersey's aquifer. We have this data, and it will be presented when appropriate. So again, shale drilling is a global issue. Our addiction to fossil fuel is a global issue. Now, all of you who have seen these promos and these PR and what I like to say, which is why I don't have a television. 99% of America has televisions. I don't have a television. Why? Because I actually want to be able to think for myself. I like to call it propaganda. Why is it that we know that shale gas is our bridge to the future? Why do we know that? We all know that, right? Shale gas is our bridge to the future. But what good is getting to a future when you've destroyed the water? Water is our bridge to the future. There are so many global issues here. I can't even, my wife even caught a misspelling. It doesn't matter. I'll use this screen. Here in the nation, the one that really gets me upset is actually on this screen. The one that really gets me upset is the record slush that we're all having to deal with now. Because it doesn't snow anymore. It thunder snows every now and then. It rains, it snows. It's all slush. It's not right. You know, the planet will blow us off like we never existed. We are ruining our environment with this kind of crazy, runaway, extractive processes. Shale drilling is a regional issue. This is a little chunk of Allegheny State Forest. Fundamentally, it's destroyed. The deforestation, now if you go to, again, DamascusCitizens.org, you'll hit the button up top. It says photos. I think yesterday 10,000 photos were downloaded yesterday of these cumulative impact. There's no way, and if, you know, what I like to notice also is how this, if you ever taken bark off a tree, you'll notice what the bacteria does on the back of the tree bark. This is almost has that kind of pattern. We're ruining our environment. The Earth's going to blow us off like we never existed. So I'm really trying to broaden this issue out. It's not about politics. It's not about fracking. It's not about anything. It's about what it is we're up to. You know, New York City did something no one else has done. They actually studied this. Because people like me 2 years ago were called demagogues, obstructionists, weirdos. But all I had to hear was 3 words in one sentence. Halliburton, watershed, and exemptions. I just needed to hear that in one sentence about 2 years ago. And I said, what are you talking? Somebody was telling me this. And I said, what are you know, oh, they're exempt from everything. Oh, yeah, right. Oh. And they're using poison, injecting millions of gallons, you know, right? And they leased the land already. They already control 35% of Hancock. I'm saying, what, you know, this is a bad dream. So our addiction is a regional issue, so much so that New York City did an 11-month study. They call this practice at the scale of deployment generally used by industry, they call it catastrophic. And there's no like less catastrophic or more catastrophic. They're calling it catastrophic circumstances. And this is New York City. So now, and it's funny, over this issue, you can see I'm very kind of, I work 24 hours a day on this thing. We're fighting for our lives. Again, one industry exempt from every law, and the PADEP staff is struggling so hard, and their budget was cut by 40% in the last 2 years? You don't know?
I don't have that number.
Okay, 40, 30? Does someone know? Okay. So the states can't handle this, and I'll show you why. Here in the watershed, there was a well drilled. And of course, they did everything they could, Chesapeake did everything they could to not have to deal with any regulation. As a matter of fact, Chesapeake is on record saying they would rather not deal with public hearings because they don't have to, wherever it is they go. They're exempt from everything. So I went up in an airplane twice, and I hate those tiny little airplanes, scared the heck out of me. And, well, there on the 25th of August, we saw this. Now, you have to see the scale here. Look at the size of the earth-moving equipment there atop. So this is contaminated runoff. And what I particularly like about it is I went up in the plane, we put it on our website, and then, of course, it was announced that the Robeson well is contaminated. Guess who's doing the investigation? Chesapeake. Now, what you'll see here in the right picture, I mean, all of this is, you know, we have the very best lawyers, the very best health experts, and this is going to stop right here in our beloved watershed, and hopefully we're working with people all over the country, all over the state. They're helping us, we're helping them. Here you'll see the surface of the 4.8 acre drilling pad. Why is it 4.8? Because they have to get a permit to do a 5 acre drilling pad, so they're making 4.8. So they're literally removing the entire surface. There's the evidence. They're removing the evidence from the site. Several days later, this entire mound, some 17 feet high, just disappeared. Where did it go? Well, the Scranton Times, so you don't have to believe me, Scranton Times did the investigation, and I read about what it is that's really happening here. What's happening here is that the site's contaminated with barium, and once again, Chesapeake is doing the investigation. Now, going south in the watershed is a little town called Philadelphia. Temple University, hundreds of people in Philadelphia now are beginning to rally. New York City is calling for a total prohibition. So much so that the Chesapeake CEO said, oh, we won't touch that. Well, it certainly makes sense because New York City wins every fight they've ever fought, but nothing is in writing. There are 37 other companies. The New York City watershed has now a catastrophic risk that it's facing, and it's the people's primary asset. And shale drilling is definitely a local issue. Look at this image. Now imagine this is eagle habitat. There are now hundreds of eagles here at this location, and that's what it will look like with the sort of deployment build-out that we can expect. This is before, and this is what it looks like now, and this is what it's going to look like. Now, imagine being close up there, and imagine all that bubbling up out of the ground, running down the hills and out into the river, down into New York City and in Philadelphia. Now I'm going to let other people talk, and I'm just going to close my pie hole, James. We got a letter last week to our website. If you get a chance to go to our website, go down and you'll see, or youtube.com/gasdrillingtruth. If you get a chance, go to Gas Drilling Truth on YouTube, and you'll see Mrs. Stimsky, I'm saying her name right, but we got a letter from her son, and this is what he had to say. Yeah, okay, that's just about what I need.
I live in Hickory, Pennsylvania. Your camera crew came to my house and interviewed my mother, Virginia Smitsky, and myself. Just to update what is going on here, we had our water sent to an independent lab for testing. The amount of toxic chemicals were off the chart. We had the Department of Environmental Protection come to the house to take a sample of the water months ago, and we waited and waited for their report. We're still waiting. We still have no report back from them. My landlord called the DEP, and they said it was safe to drink. The day they took the water sample, I took a picture of our water. You won't believe it. Brown, oily water flows through our pipes. DEP took 3 vials of this water for testing. The independent lab told us not to drink the water, not to use it for cooking, and not to use it for bathing. Too many people have their pockets padded, though. What are we to do? We take quick, lukewarm showers. We do not drink the stuff and don't use it for cooking. We buy a lot of bottled water. Here is a picture of the brown water. It's not always this brown, but it's always full of toxins. It's strange how people are so scared of the swine flu, but when you talk about how the gas drillers are poisoning our water, people think you're crazy, or they get mad because they think they can get rich off the deal the gas company is promising. The money is more important to them than their health. Finally, but maybe too late for us, people's eyes are starting to open and see the truth. Thank you for keeping up the fight. I know I will. The future of our nation's health depends on it.
And there's just one small additional detail that I'll close with. In the state of Pennsylvania, people have a constitutional right. This is one thing that the Cheney think tank overlooked when they put their scheme together in 2001 in their secret meeting with industry. The people in Pennsylvania in 1971, crazy time, wasn't it, 1971? The people of Pennsylvania in 1971 got a new right. And here, I invite you please to read that right. The people in Pennsylvania have a right to clean air and pure water. Now, I want to ask you, so I'll leave you with a question. No information, just a bunch of disconnected, big picture items here, I hope. But is this young man's mother, is she being afforded her constitutional rights? Are her constitutional rights being trampled on if she's got to deal with this? People in the state of Pennsylvania have a constitutional right to pure water. And I'll leave you with that. Thank you. That's the thing, the lights. You can bring those back up.
Just like that?
Yeah.
Thank you. Pat, thank you very much. And Pat's discussion tonight touches on many issues. One, the fact that gas extraction, fracking, natural gas drilling is a local, a regional, a statewide, a national, and a global topic of discussion for many reasons. He brings up another concept which I'm not sure we're prepared to handle tonight, and that's consumption, and how that affects our daily lives and what in the long term consumption does in general to the planet and what we should and should not be doing. And then quality of life issues, that's the bottom line. Pat talked about water and air quality, and those are part of our overall quality of life issues that affect how we live every day, including our standard of living. The one theme, and we covered several tonight, and the science and technology and the geology behind this is extensive. And as I said, I don't think we could walk away with all the answers, but perhaps some information to lead us on the continued path toward enlightenment, if you will. But the one thing that keeps coming out is issues regarding the environment, whether it be water, whether it would be air quality, how to prepare for incidences and things like that. And we heard from Matt and Wendy, who talked about the desire for their companies to proceed in a responsible and safe manner. Pam brought up the topic that there were some air quality tests in Canada, was it? And methane was released. I continued to play with Google this week for a number of reasons regarding this event and other research, and found that Texas does air quality tests on a regular basis, and their air quality tests are coming up negative, clean, safe, no significant levels of toxins. So,
That's not true. That's one test.
but they're running tests on a regular basis, and they're testing for chemicals. Okay. Part of the discussion then, as we look at this tonight, is in light of the fact that natural gas drilling is not essentially new, and fracking is not essentially new, and it's not new to Pennsylvania, it's becoming more of a newer technology, or a visible technology to deal with energy issues in our state and our country. So how do we proceed then with regard to ensuring that our environment stays protected? It seems...
Can I respond to that? And in doing so, respond to this comment that's been made here many times. Probably just about every speaker said this. Is this mic on? Well, don't need it. Okay. While hydraulic fracturing and drilling, I mean, while this may not be new, what's being done now is brand new. What's being done now has only been done for 4 years. What's being done now is, and I'm not even religious, but there's only word to describe it. What's being done now is unholy. So what's being done now has only been done for 4 years, since the 2005 exemptions. The degree to which the practices are the result of the exemptions. That's my position, and I'm sure we'll hear others, but I've heard this several times.
It's my understanding that drilling has been going on in other states for 10 to 12 years.
This form of hydraulic
20
fracturing.
years in the Barnett Shale, this has been going on. This is not new. Not at all, sir.
So the practices preceded the exemptions.
Absolutely.
Yeah, but
Absolutely.
but since the exceptions, there is zero liability at the federal level. Well, why else would you need the exemptions? Why else? Now, by the way, my brother is now involved in this on the other side. It's almost.
Pennsylvania's clean stream law is much tougher than the federal law.
Okay.
Let's go back to the discussion about Texas first. Texas has been doing this, you said, for 20 years. Texas has, well, we can't say for sure has handled this well as a state in terms of policy or not, but obviously they've had some successes. We can learn from their successes. We can learn from their failures. What is Texas doing that we in Pennsylvania should be doing? Can you identify any types of regulatory policy or any environmental safeguards on the differences between the two states? I mean, I would assume if you're talking about safe and responsible drilling here, you're obviously doing that in other states.
I think it was just that the reference to Texas is probably just where the technology was born,
Okay.
due to probably the proximity of the operators at the time
Mm-hmm.
to the discovery of the Barnett Shale, for their ability to understand how hydraulic fracturing can stimulate more of the shale. I think that, more than anything else, is probably what led to that discovery.
The one thing that I can applaud Pennsylvania DEP for is they're on our sites every week inspecting. There was a little difference in the number of inspectors, but DEP has been vastly hiring as far as or moving people over into the inspection and getting them out into the field to check on us. And the industry is inviting them out to our sites and come check to see that we're following all the rules and regulations that we're supposed to be. Instead of, filling out a lot of paperwork in the office where those officers aren't out on our sites. They do come out on our sites every week. They're on our locations. Matt, you were saying that they're on your locations every week as well. Yes?
How many locations do we have in the state? Was it 600,000? 350,000 and we have 16 inspectors and they're there every week?
There are.
They're not
No, there's not active
There are
drilling.
not 16 inspectors for the entire state.
No.
Those may have been, I think I heard the number 17, which I think there was some confusion there because, like I said, when our program started a year ago, we were given 17 positions for the eastern region. So there's definitely more than, I don't know what the total number of inspectors is for the state,
Under
but
50, over 50?
probably around that. Both of the western programs, the Meadville oil and gas program and the one in Pittsburgh, which have been around longer, have around 50 people total on each. That includes permit reviewers and inspectors, and like I said, ours is kind of growing, so.
And
We're
it's
referring
on
to where we're
active
drilling.
sites.
Active sites. There have been more than 300,000 wells drilled since the beginning of the industry in Pennsylvania. We were talking about inspectors coming out to the sites where we are working.
Okay.
While they're active, once the well's producing and the site's reclaimed, inspectors don't come on
Oh,
every
wait,
week.
wait, once the well's
we're-
producing, you don't see the need for inspectors, is that what you're saying?
Not at all. I didn't say that. I said the inspectors don't come out as often. They still come on out.
Yes, we're going to have the Q&A shortly. You were all given index cards. If you have not completed an index card, please do so and hold it up, and someone from the league will walk around and collect them. We're going to try and have some discussion now with just the panelists. They weren't given a lot of time in light of the fact that we're doing a short intro event here. So we wanted to give them time to emphasize some of the points in their discussion.
One point about Texas, if I could make a very brief point. Texas actually is, I think, a good model. Texas is turning into a desert. So much water is being drawn out of the hydraulic cycle that last month there was snow in Texas. Now that just causes the problem to be even worse because the snow evaporates and it never makes it into the water cycle. So Texas, I think, is a good model. It's turning into a desert.
Pam, you brought up the concept of balancing economy and environment as a method going forward. And in part of that, you talked about a taxation policy to reinvest into the communities. Has Penn Futures taken that recommendation to the state legislature? Are there hearings? Where are we on that kind of a discussion?
Legislation is actually proposed to enact a severance tax in Pennsylvania, and Representative Bud George is one of the legislators who is pushing for a severance tax in Pennsylvania. Pennsylvania is one of the very few states that has extraction of natural resources that does not have a severance tax. There are states with severance taxes that extract natural resources. That there was a study done last year that said in 2008 most of those states didn't have the kind of budget cuts that the rest of the country experienced. Some of those people have low or no property taxes. I mean, there are all kinds of things that a severance tax can do. What we're looking to help support in Pennsylvania is the kind of tax that would not take all of this revenue that could potentially and will most likely come from Marcellus drilling, from drilling into the Marcellus in this Commonwealth, and put it into the Pennsylvania General Fund. What we're looking to do is push Representative George's legislation that would take a chunk of that revenue and then break it down to, as I mentioned, local municipalities who are going to have to deal with strains on their services, police, fire, et cetera, would go back to road repair. Is one of those things. I mean, some of the drillers do, as part of their agreements, repair roads that get torn up by the increased truck traffic and so on. That happens. But we want to make sure the municipalities, for the long term, can deal with whatever the impacts are going to be. Also, to go to DCNR, to go to DEP. DEP increased the fee to apply for a permit for drilling. That was just about, it was in October, I think, that actually went into effect. The extra the money that now comes from that fee helped to fund these extra positions that are now being added. But we're just really at the beginning stages of this drilling. as it gets bigger and bigger and bigger, of course, we're going to need more staff and so on to keep up with that. So the theory is, if we have a severance tax, that, by the way the current legislation is written, wells have to get to a certain level of production before they would be taxed. So we're not talking about the people maybe in western Pennsylvania that have a small well that they use to power their own property and so on. You know, they wouldn't be adversely affected. We're talking about the big production. Now, there are some drilling companies that say Pennsylvania already has an exorbitant corporate tax. And how can we put a severance tax on top of that corporate tax? Many, not all, but many of the drilling companies doing business in Pennsylvania are organized in such a way, they're limited liability partnerships, so they're not paying that corporate tax. They're paying the personal income tax that we pay, we as individuals pay. And remember, there's also a break to the industry on transportation costs. We're already in the northeast part of the country where the major natural gas market is. It doesn't have to be piped from Texas or Arkansas or Oklahoma or other places. So there's money being saved there. So if we're talking about a 5 or 5.4 or 6 or whatever % severance tax on production, then it's really not that, shouldn't be that big a deal.
And the taxation policy is one fiscal or impact or policy statewide that we need to consider. But Jennifer, through DEP with the regulatory policy, you focused on PPC plans. But one of the things that happens before that is if a drilling company is going to drill, they have to apply to your agency for a permit, as well as you had mentioned through some of the watershed agencies. What is that permit process? What is involved in that, and what do the drilling companies have to do in that permit process?
There's actually a number of different permits that could potentially be involved. The main permit, I guess you would say, is the drilling permit that they need, and that's the permit that we're still not handling out of our office in Williamsport. So they would go to Meadville or the Pittsburgh offices to review that drilling permit application. And then they also would likely need the permits for the surface activities. So the earth disturbance activities, erosion sediment control permit, that would come to our office. So they would need to submit that to show that they're going to have practices in place to prevent any of that erosion and sedimentation from leaving the site, getting to streams or wetlands. And again, permits if they want to cross streams or wetlands, if they need to put in culverts or fill to get to their site, or for their pipeline activities, all of those activities, they need to submit a permit to our office to make sure there won't be any, negative impacts from those activities.
Okay.
And if I could just interject a point here regarding this issue. About a year and a half ago, I was at a presentation by a PA DEP staff personnel, and he just casually just told the audience that, oh well, yeah. Someone asked, what's the permit process like, and is it is it the demand? He says, well, we generally issue 99.5% of the permit requests we get. So, with all due respect to our public official here, any organization that issues 99% of the permits are doing nothing more than just recording them and pushing them through. I think you all need to know that the PADEP said they issue about 99% of the permit requests that they receive. That, I think, is irrelevant.
I think if there are certain things that any industry has to do to gain a permit, and you fulfill all the requirements of that process, at that point the permit is issued.
And I don't know where that number came from,
Yeah.
but I will say that many of the permits that come into our office, again, on the earth disturbance side or the stream and wetland encroachment side, I know we've sent back a number of those, to be honest, but a lot of them that come in may not be able to be approved as they are submitted. But there are maybe deficiencies noted sent to the applicant, and they have to address those before we will issue the permit. So it's by no means just that it's submitted and approved as the permit.
Okay. One of the things that we didn't spend a lot of time on in any of your discussions, it was mentioned a little bit by Pam and a little bit between Matt and Wendy, is job creation and economic impact. and that type of investment in Pennsylvania. Perhaps you could give us some more information on the types of jobs created here, or perhaps using what's been done in other states, so that, because as I understand, there's everything from the scientific and the professional to the technical and the construction side, and that the industry cluster in and of itself is very significant.
I think the one thing about the industry that you have to understand is, and we've seen it across America in many industries, as technology increases, in any industry or in most places, what happens? The technology increases, the jobs do go away. And that is one thing about the natural gas industry that is different. As technology has increased, the job opportunities have increased as well, because you still need all of the people to do the work. You still need the top level scientists, you still need the geophysicists, you still need engineers to understand all of the issues that go with the wells. And then you also need what you could consider the traditional blue-collar jobs of working out in the field once the well is producing. Brian, I think each will probably have long-term 3 or 4 full-time jobs for about every 30 to 40 wells that we drill. And those are people who would then go out into the field, and they would be called either well tenders or superintendents at some point to go out and check and do the routine maintenance that goes along with having wells in production. And in Pennsylvania, what we've seen is at the start of the year, we had about 250 employees, and I'm talking about my company, Chesapeake in particular right now, about 250 employees in the state of Pennsylvania, and we're up almost to 900 in 1 year. So it's been a dramatic growth in job opportunities within the company, but then you also have to understand that many of the jobs are not with our company, they're with companies that do follow us along to do service work for the company, because we do need a lot of services when you are drilling a well. I think every rig supplies about 120 jobs, and if you look at the rig count, you can extrapolate what that means. We're having a big training component where all of those, what I call the well tenders, are being hired locally, and we're also training workers to work on the rigs that are local workers as well, because it is an expertise that you need and you may not have had locally. So the training aspect is a big part of it as well. I don't want to dominate the discussion, so
I'll bring it up.
Okay. So you have a wide range of jobs that we've seen. I think the Penn State study showed that only about 7% of the jobs that would be created would actually be direct, what you would consider natural gas jobs. Everything else would be support, everything from truck drivers to you know, every kind of industry you can imagine was represented in some way in that, but the drilling aspect of it was only about 7%.
Mm-hmm.
If I could just add a little anecdotal information, and I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I think there are sort of short-term and long-term projections in terms of employment. I mean, as you mentioned, Matt, you need an experienced workforce. So this is kind of new to us in Pennsylvania. We don't necessarily have a sort of in-house experienced workforce. So there is at least a point in time where people will come from out of state. But I understand Lackawanna College, for example, has started a Marcellus program to help train a workforce. I believe Penn State has started a program. So I think more Pennsylvania employment will evolve over time. And it won't be just people who are on the drill site or driving the trucks and so on. Remember that as there are more people coming to work, there are also those support industries like the restaurants in the towns where people are drilling and the hotels and so on, where people who work there, or there'll be more need for those kinds of things, and they'll occur. Now, on the kind of flip side of that, though, if I could just tell a short story, a coworker of mine who attended a conference on low-income housing about a month or so ago was telling a story that at that conference, someone related a story about a family in Towanda, not too far from here. Family had been leasing a house on a farmette for 30 years, raising a family, et cetera, paying $700 a month. The person who owns the farmette was approached by the gas industry and said, we have temporary workers who will be coming in sort of 3-week blocks. This house would house 4 workers at a time. So the man was offered, or the person who owned the property was offered $1,000 per week per worker. That's $4,000 per week is $16,000 per month. Now, that's great, and that person didn't even have to sign a lease. And all of a sudden, look at that, and how could that person say no? I mean, that's a tremendous boon for that person. But the family who had been living there for 30 years had to travel 52 miles to find the next affordable place that they could live. So imagine what that does to disrupt that family's life. Again, there are all sorts of trickle-down effects and things that will have to be dealt with, some good, some bad. It's a matter of how all of this is managed and meshed together.
Pam, thank you. I was just informed that this will complete the directed discussion portion of the program tonight, and now we're moving on to your question and answers that you submitted on the index cards. There are a number of questions, and some of them are in my hand, and I've been directed to go through as many as we can to get to the 9 o'clock end time of the event. The league is also requesting that the panelists respond to the questions that we don't get to, and the league will post the questions and the panelists' responses on their websites in the days following the events. So please be rest assured, if your question is not one that we get through this evening, that your questions and concerns and comments will be addressed post-event. What's the web address?
lwblackawanna.org.
Okay.
And it's on the program.
Okay, it's on the program, on your purple program. If you didn't grab one, please do so at the registration table on your way out. The first question is, where are we concerning the Frack Act? Can anybody give us maybe a current status of the Frack Act? I know it's a Senator Casey bill. Has it formally?
Casey is sponsored in the Senate. There are a number of Congress people, but where we are is Exxon recently purchased XTO. Again, we're in the Marcellus play, so with players in the room, we're beginning to see the cards sort of be put on the table. The Exxon deal with XTO was a $41 billion deal, contingent, in my estimation, on the Frack Act. If the Frack Act is passed, ExxonMobil has the right to back out of a $41 billion deal. So you can see the chess pieces on the board being moved about.
Well,
so that's really sort of an overview of really the dynamic on the Frack Act. Now the Frack Act is now being considered and being lobbied and being revised and being discussed.
And I know when, I believe it was in June in Washington, when the Groundwater Protection Council testified about hydraulic fracturing and stated on the record that there never had been an incident of contamination from hydraulic fracturing.
Wait.
I'm sorry. That the issue is, will states continue to regulate, or will be the
all
federal
right,
government?
please, let him respond to the question.
No, the mic's not working. So we'll just try to speak a little louder.
Okay. And we have a few other people in the audience I can probably hand off to too. And I don't know if Ken Kamarowski in the front row wants to add anything.
Yeah, we're answering now what's happened to the Frack Act.
I'm not a Frack Act expert.
All I'm saying is you're
Although
going
I
off
wish
into
I could be.
something else, and we don't.
No, I didn't know if you wanted, sir. I didn't know if you had anything he could add.
And we'd like to actually just have the panel answer questions. Thank you,
Yeah.
James, so we can go on to the next unless someone else has something to say
I don't know if
about
somebody
the Frack
has
Act.
anything that would be relevant to the discussion that would help us
Thank you.
educate ourselves. If they could add, I think it would be a benefit for people to say something.
Okay, well, what we need to know at this point, thank you. That's enough on that question. What I'll do is I'll ask that this question be returned to the file, and then we could actually look at, if the bill has been introduced, what committees it has been heard in, if any, as of yet, and if there is an estimated timetable to move the bill forward.
We'll sign that when you meet Terry.
Okay.
Thank you.
This says it's a question for Jennifer or anyone. Will regulation changes be applied retroactively, or will existing permits be grandfathered? And it doesn't
Yeah.
specify the types of regulations, but maybe.
I'm not sure about that. Just to explain a little bit. In the regional office, our job is to basically implement the regulations that come down. I know a little bit about the proposed regulations. Some of what's being proposed actually would affect existing wells. I do know that much in terms of looking at some of the issues relating to the quality of the well casing and that sort of thing, but probably not all of it. Usually, not everything is
So
retroactive.
it's going to be based on what type of regulation it is, whether it would be applicable to a new or existing
Right.
well site. Okay. The next question. In January 2009, there were 15 DEP inspectors for 60,000 drill sites. How many inspectors are there for how many drill sites as of January 2010? So I guess
I don't think the first number was right.
Okay.
So I can't, yeah.
And the second number isn't correct either.
well,
Not for the number of well sites. I didn't say that.
Well, what was the 60,000 referring to?
I didn't have any 60,000.
Total
What is it
active
now?
wells in production.
I don't know whose presentation that came from.
that was
wasn't
yours.
mine.
So there's 60,000 active Marcellus Shale.
Not Marcellus, no.
No.
I'm sorry, no,
Okay.
not Marcellus.
So there could be, you're talking oil and gas. Okay, so
Going on her number there.
Vertical.
horizontal,
Yeah,
so a
right.
little bit beyond the topic that we're talking about tonight with regards to those active numbers. So maybe what we could do for this question is look at how many active drill sites there are as of January 2010, and then Jennifer, in the response to these, you can indicate how many people are employed at DEP and what are field workers. Okay. Question for Mr. Shepard. I am the Northeast manager of the Carpenters Union and president of the Scranton Building Trades. Chesapeake and all of the other companies are bringing on hundreds of out-of-state workers who do not pay local taxes. When are you going to reach out to the local building trades for contractors to work on the pumping stations and water treatment plants and put local tax-paying citizens to work?
I know we've spent $100 million with Pennsylvania businesses this year. We have hired many local people. I think at one point recently, of the 18 contractors that we had working, 16 were local, 2 were out of state. I'm sorry. Of the 18 contractors
Here
we
we
had,
go.
16 were local and 2 were from out of state. It offered expertise that we didn't have here. And with all due respect, I'm going to ask Brian if there is an updated number, because Brian does see a lot of the on-the-ground work in Northeast Pennsylvania, and he can speak up really loud.
I think as of Monday was the last time I saw the list. We were utilizing about 20 different construction contractors.
Can you stand up and turn around so that we can hear you?
We were utilizing about 20 different construction contractors. I would say 19 of them which you would characterize as being local, and by that I mean northern tier to Scranton to the southern tier of New York. And of the one that I know that isn't local, they originally came up here from Texas. They brought some expertise with them, but this company itself has now hired largely local people, folks from Bradford County and Susquehanna County that is doing the work. So there's a lot of different ways you can split that, but largely we are using local contractors.
Okay, so as a member of the panel, I'd like to say that what we've heard now is from an actual worker saying, why isn't it that the industry isn't, the word he used was isn't. He didn't use the word 29 or 19 were local and 1 was from Texas. We have a question from someone in the room. Could I please see a show of hand and who made this question? This gentleman here. Would you like to, are local workers being hired to the degree that seems appropriate to you?
Every license plate we're seeing are all from out of state.
Thank you very much. And this is what we see across the region and across the country.
I think
Well,
what you see
thank
are,
you very much for us being able to hear.
and I'd be
from,
happy to step outside and we can talk, and I can get
from
your
a-
card, and we'll do all that stuff,
Great.
because that's
We
how
have,
good
an
commerce
opportunity
happens.
for some
Okay.
business to transpire.
Okay, well, and this is interesting, and we have to understand here that the drilling in the Commonwealth right now is in the infancy stages. So I think we need to take into perspective job creation, economic impact, the regulatory environment, and the fiscal also being in the infancy stages, and something that we have to work together and essentially connect as we continue to develop the industry with regard to all facets of policy development, community development, and economic development. And that's part of the quality of life, yes. Okay, this next question had to do with jobs and mirrored the first. And another question that was added on to this, sort of a part B, where it's talking about jobs created and filled with local people, and for how long? What is the life expectancy of a well?
Well, we've only drilled a few, so it's hard to say, but we would say that a Marcellus well would certainly produce for decades.
Okay, so we're talking long-term jobs then. Okay.
No, if I can interject, we're not talking long-term jobs. We're talking transient workers moving from drill site to drill site. Halliburton says on their own website that the various and sundry wells can be fracked up to 50 years. So a drilling company will come in and they'll refrack a well, pump millions of gallons of water and chemicals into the ground, and then move on to the next site. These are temporary jobs, they're transient jobs, and there are a number of studies that really demonstrate the fact that there will be almost no permanent jobs created from this endeavor. Now, of course, there's trickle down. You know, there'll be automobiles sold, there'll be houses built, there'll be lots of roads to repair.
And every
which we'll have to pay for, not industry.
The jobs that are created, there will be long-term jobs. There will be people who come in because it takes a few weeks to drill a well. So those people then, of course, are not going to be at the same location every time, but there will be long-term jobs. I'm looking at 3 people here from northern Pennsylvania who are working for us. I'm hoping it's long-term for them. And there are many different cases like that. Say, please.
Look, can I please make a request to the panel director? We would like to just hear from the panel at this point, not from past politicians who have gone from public service to industry.
Also, excuse me. There's a point.
Who's participating?
No, excuse me. There's a point that we need to make here. With all due respect, we are videotaping this to air on public access television. We hope to air this to literally thousands and thousands and thousands of people. Only the dais is mic'd. So anytime that anybody speaks on the floor, on television, the viewers that we have there, they're not going to hear anything. It's important that everything come from here. And if our moderator wants to repeat a question from the floor, I'm sorry, from the audience, we can do that. But just keep in mind that we're taping this. We want many, many, many more people to see this other than what's in this room tonight. And we need for them to be able to hear it as well.
Well, thank you. Please. So we're asking for no speeches from the audience, and questions are welcomed, and we'll make responses as best we can.
Well, right now we're going to stick to the questions on the cards because they did come from the audience, and we recognize that questions and answers may generate even more questions. But for now, we're going to go with what we have here on the cards. Are there any safety regulations for people building facilities to support Marcellus Shale? Training requirements, i.e. Building for construction workers, and will there be any intermediate pumping stations built in northeastern Pennsylvania? Well, then there's a third part. And I could repeat these, but how many compression stations, pumping stations, and water treatment facilities will be built?
I think we have to poll the operators.
That's very tough to say as far as how many stations will be built. That's more of a pipeline company question. The big interstate pipelines, they're the ones that build those stations, and I saw in a brochure, and I don't know if it was correct, but every 40 miles to every 100 miles there might be a station. So I don't know if that's absolutely correct or not, but.
Okay, the other question had to do with training requirements for construction workers.
Yeah, absolutely, there are. There's certain ways if we're going to going to construct a pad site. We have taken some local contractors they've never built a pad site, taken them out to Western Pennsylvania to show them what other contractors have done and to train them how to do it, and then brought them back here, and they've built our site. So there's from the aspect of building the site, there's certainly OSHA requirements and all the things that we have to abide by that we do.
Okay. All right, this is another 4-part index card, so I'm just going to start with the first one, and we'll go down from there instead of reading you 3 questions at once. What are the arguments for and against higher severance taxes on production and fair market value for leases on state lands?
Can you repeat that one more time, just so
Sure.
I get a little clearer
Before
picture of what the
before we actually
question's
have
trying to
you-
address?
I can actually respond to a portion of that. And thus far, I believe we haven't discussed the constitutional right that we all have to clean water, and we haven't actually heard any response from industry and from PADEP with regard to this just pleading letter that we've gotten. And by the way, we've gotten hundreds of these communications from the community. But also in the PA state constitution, there is a clause, the very, very next sentence in Article 1, Section 27 says that the public lands are to be protected for generations to come, plural. So already 1/4 of the public lands have already been leased to do what it was you saw in the Allegheny. I propose here, officially propose, that since 1/4 of them are already leased, so the industry has control of 1/4 of our public lands, which we have the constitutional right to, I'd like to propose here, and maybe have our panel members and other studio audience members consider this. I'd like to propose that half of our public lands remain public. And I'd like to suggest that those public lands are available to generations not yet born. I'd like to suggest that the other 1/4 of the public lands be set aside maybe for hunting and recreation and water. So I'd like to propose that the remaining 3/4 of the public lands be preserved for generations not yet born and the young people who are in the room.
DCNR and state game lands have very strict access rules. They understand what their lands are. We actually have been working with them to build our pad sites on former strip mines that we can then reclaim, and that helps everybody. We have also worked with them to plant certain types of clover when we reclaim a pad to bring more elk over from Elk County into Clearfield County. That promotes more tourism. So there's a lot of ways that we can work and help the environment and help the tourism industry and all that sort of thing. So without, just coloring it as that we have access to all of those lands, there are certain areas we are absolutely restricted from going into. And if you go to DCNR's website, they had showed the maps of the last lease sale, and it shows where industry can access on those leases and where we cannot. And there's quite a bit. There's view sheds. There's certain trees that they've marked off where industry can't go into, and it is quite an extensive amount.
And I'll give a specific example of this in the Allegheny Forest. The Interior Department said to the industry last year, "Wow, we're going to just slow this thing down a bit." So now the Interior Department, our federal government, said to the industry, "We're going to slow this thing down a bit." Well, the industry decided to sue. So the industry sued the government because they weren't moving quick enough, handing over our public lands quick enough. So there's an ongoing case now regarding that issue.
Oh. And land use and public policy issues, I'm sorry, we're going to continue with the questions up here. The land use and public policy issues are certainly another area that we haven't even touched on early in tonight's discussion, but with all due respect to this person's card I'm holding, I would like to go to the next question.
Sherry, I'm sorry. That was my card, and
Oh.
I actually circled the one I wanted you to ask. 'Cause
Oh.
many of them got answered as the
Okay.
discussion went along. So it's the very last question on the card. Is
Okay.
the one that I really wanted.
What are the penalties for violations? Are they steep enough to be useful deterrents to violations? And Jennifer, this was directed to you.
Well, it depends on what the violation is. So it's dependent on the violation, it's depending on the history of the operator, if they have there's been a history of these violations, all of that goes into the severity of whether or not, water streams are impacted in any way. All of that goes into the calculation. So it depends on what the violation is. I guess I can't really give a number, but I can tell you that it's not our only compliance tool. We have a number of companies where we've had violations that were pending, and when that happens, we don't issue the permits that are pending. So that's probably our biggest compliance tool. If we have violations, then those permits sit until the violations are resolved. So that's another one of our compliance tools beyond penalties.
Okay, Jennifer, there's a couple other questions directed to you, and I was told it has to be one that's really short. So this is the shortest one. What is the optimum ratio of inspectors to open sites to ensure compliance with environmental protection laws? Is your agency there, or do you need more inspectors? Or will you need them in the future, but not necessarily right now?
Yes, I'm sure that's a safe answer to say we will need them in the future. Based on what we've heard from the major players in the Marcellus area and what their projections are in terms of activity, we will definitely need more as time goes on.
Okay. Well, thank you, everyone. That's all the time we have for questions this evening. Again, the questions will be posted with responses. Thank you for your time, and thank you to our panelists.
Thank you very much.
And I'd just like to thank all of our panelists, and I would like to thank all of you for attending this evening and for your questions, your thoughtful questions, and also the University of Scranton for providing us with this facility and the room. Thank you.
Okay. I'm sorry.